Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1. Hi guys, welcome to Holy Spirit. It's a new podcast where we dive into the gospel with a little help from our beverages of choice.
Jesus met people where they were, at tables, over meals, with stories that made the sacred feel ordinary and the ordinary feel sacred. Holy Spirits follows that same tradition, creating space for honest, authentic conversations about faith, just as he did.
Holy Spirits can be found on all Studio Wesley Annex channels. Remember, drink responsibly, avoid excessive alcohol use, and always follow John Wesley's first general rule: do no harm.
Welcome everybody to our last episode of Holy Spirits. I'm trying not to do my regular intro because usually this is an Annex recording, but today I'm joined by a very, very special guest, Stiles Williams from back home in Orlando, Florida. We couldn't, unfortunately, record in person today, so we're going to be the recording on StreamYard, but wanted to throw it to you, Alice. Give us, for everybody at home, most people who are a part of Studio Wesley already know who you are, but name what kind of choice beverage are you drinking today, and then because me and you go a very long ways back, so I wanted to throw you on the spot without preparing you ahead of time and say, what's your first Sam memory before we start this podcast?
Oh my gosh. Oh, Sam. Okay, first. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Stiles Williams, and I live in Orlando, Florida, literally just down the street from where Sam lives. And my choice beverage today, it is a beautiful spring day here in Orlando. It's 80 degrees. I've been out in the yard working, and my beverage of choice today is I'm headed to the mountains. So I got my Coors Light, and I'm good to go here. So when I'm really hot, that's the way to refresh.
And then what's your first Sam memory? I'm excited because I don't know the answer to this question.
Sam, actually, there's a couple, but I think probably the one that I cherish the most, and I think it's one that speaks a lot about your character. You were next door playing with the neighbors' kids because they had a couple of boys that were about your age, and you guys were on bikes or whatever, or maybe it was a Razor. Maybe you guys were like on a Razor just scooting around. I can't remember what, something that had wheels, and one of them wrecked, and I mean he wrecked bad. He really did. And we kind of heard the commotion, so came out, didn't want to, interfere. We're not trying to be, nosy neighbors or anything. But whenever the kids were out, we were always kind of around in case anybody got hurt. And there was a little bit of crying and hoo-ha, but you kind of walked over to him and just made sure he was okay. And it was the way that you did it. It was a very kind and tender kind of thing. And Debbie and I both looked at each other and thought, this guy's good. This guy's good. He's the kind of friend you want to have. And you weren't very old. I'm going to say you were maybe 10.
If I was back there with the neighbors, I must have been like 8 or 9 at that point.
Yeah,
I was elementary school.
10, but yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, but mature for your age in that respect, but very, very caring. Yeah.
That was a much more sentimental answer than I expected. Just for the people at home, I am 20 years old, so I will be drinking water with a little bit of liquid IV in it for extra hydration because it's been a hot day here. But my first memory, Alice, of you, I don't think you remember this. I must have been in 5th grade, and it was for Wednesday night group. It wasn't youth group at the time because we were too young. And you were brought in as a guest speaker, and you talked about your experience in the church and your experience in different churches that treated you different ways. And I remember going up to my mom afterwards and being like, we met this really nice woman, Alice, and she like grabbed me and was like, Stiles Williams, you think you don't know Alice? I was like, yeah, how do you know Alice? I thought I just made this random connection. She was like, you've known her since you got here. She lives right down the street. So I don't know if my mom even remembers that.
I remember that night, though. I do remember coming to talk to that group because it was at St. Luke's, right? I don't know why, but I'm always more nervous when I talk at St. Luke's than I am anywhere else.
People know you. Apparently, yeah, I didn't. I didn't. I was just like, this nice woman I met. She had a cool story. But with that, we're going to just throw ourselves right into this conversation. So we got to, full disclosure from the back end, us interns got to pick whatever Lent text we wanted. And I have been waiting to talk about Gethsemane, Alice, since I got here. I bring it up, I feel like, on every Annex episode because it's just my absolute favorite. So let's just start with some like initial impressions. I know I kind of threw you into the water with sending you a very loaded text, but what first impressions from Luke 22?
So the first thing, very timely, right? I mean, because we're in Lent right now. This is going to be leading up to when this actually happens. I think it's one of the most human moments that Jesus ever experiences. I think it's one of those pieces of scripture that in some way, in some form, at some time in all of our lives, I think we can relate to. It deals with life. It deals with death. It deals with our limited understanding of death, in my opinion. And I think it is the Jesus who is fully human and yet fully God, experiencing all of that together. So I was really excited when you did this. And not to jump ahead, but I also love the song that you picked because it's one of my favorites too.
Mm-hmm. So when I sent Alice a full paragraph of what I wanted to talk about with this, I sent her Gethsemane from Jesus Christ Superstar, which I think actually, this sounds sacrilege to say, that might have been my first introduction to this story of like fully processing it. Because I remember it was my favorite version of it, which is a controversial opinion, is the John Legend version from the live show. And I remember seeing it. I was watching it live with my parents, and I was at a very specific time in my life. I think it was 6th or 7th grade. And so that's when you start understanding like anxiety and understanding that the world's not always great and not always perfect. And my family in my 6th grade year went through a lot, went through the loss of my grandfather, who was a rock in all of our lives. And so I remember seeing this song and being like, Jesus is having a panic attack.
Kind of, sort of.
I get it. Like that, and you said it perfectly without any of my like me talking about it. Why I love this text is like it is human Jesus, and yet he is godly because of what he chooses to do. But like this is just real human emotions,
raw, in the raw, right?
100%.
And there's so much about that whole story, Sam. I mean, you could back up even. So they're coming for the Passover, right? And so Jesus basically tells his buddies, his disciples, his posse, however you like to think of them, go into town and it's one of these like God cryptic kind of things, a little weird, but go into town and look for the guy with the earthen vessel of water. He doesn't even tell him his name. Now this is Jesus, who's go look for the guy with a jar of water. And I can only picture the disciples going into town and like this small group of guys kind of standing on a street corner watching all the girls go by. Kind of thing.
Think we're going to find someone with a vessel of water?
Waiting for a guy to come by with a vessel of water, right? And then walking up to him and say, my master has need of a room, which that in itself, stop there. It was all already prearranged. The disciples didn't have anything to do with it, but that somehow in the background, all of this has been at work, right? Just go meet the guy with the vessel of water, and and sure enough, they do. They go to the place. In one of the scriptures, one of the I think it's John. They say it that it's Lazarus, the leper's house that they actually go to. But anyway, there's no name given at the beginning. Just go to this guy's house, and sure enough, everything is set, and they all have this dinner together. I'm sure that Jesus spoke in ways that they were like, we kind of understand, but we're not really sure what's coming, but there's something coming, don't know what's happening, but it must be pretty bad. And Jesus is saying, this is the last time that I'll dine with you, basically. Judas kind of knows the role he's going to play. That's kind of starting to play out. Jesus is letting Judas know that I know that you know, and all this kind of stuff's going on. And then after it's all said and done, then in one of the scriptures, and I think it was either Mark or it might have been in John, No, it's in Luke. It's in the Luke story. They start to play who's the goat, who's the greatest of us all, right? After this dinner that they're having, and it's the last, now they want to play, hey, Jesus, who of us is the greatest kind of thing. And I'm thinking
that,
to myself,
we can stop there for a second. We talked about that text, I think, last year on Annex. That is human. That is the most disciples just, they don't know what's happening.
And it kind of shows totally how clueless and how dumb we can be in our humanness, right? I mean, hey, Jesus, who of us is the greatest? Who of us? And Jesus is like, in a lovely way, you don't get it, do you? Yeah. Right? I mean, really, the greatest of you. It's not about the one who sits at the table. It's the one who serves. It's the one who's the least. But he does give a head nod. He gives a head nod to Simon Peter, and he says, "I've prayed a special prayer for you, Peter. The devil came and said that he wanted to tempt you, and I've prayed a special prayer that after you turn and come back." Now, Peter, what do you mean turn and come back? What did I do? What are you talking about? Jesus says to him, after you've turned and come back, then he gives him kind of the head nod that he's the one. And then later we find that there's scripture that says, upon this rock I will build my church. Kind of thing. So, I mean, there's all this cool stuff that's happening in this moment. And then it's all said and done. And then they go off. Jesus says, I need to pray. This is kind of a cool thing. I'm an extrovert, but I got to have introverted moments. Yeah. I'm guessing that Jesus is thinking, this is really starting to get heavy. I know it's coming. I need some time, but I want my homies around me. I want my friends. I want the people that I love. And he says to him, y'all, and different gospels do it different ways, but y'all come with me. We're going to go to the garden. I need to pray. And it's interesting that it's Gethsemane because if I'm not mistaken, I think the term Gethsemane, it means the press of olives, right? So there's oppression even in that, right? So I think that's kind of a cool, okay.
I think you said it best because like the reason that I love this text is I personally, theologically, this is not something everybody agrees with. I don't always get the omniscient Jesus, the like everything is preordained. I understand that. That's hard for me to relate to. That's easy for me to worship, but not for me to relate to. But this text, it goes from everything is set up, I know what's going to happen, to like, oh, I know what's going to happen, and now I have to do it. And that gets me every time. It's the key line of this, which is like expounded in the song. It's, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Like, I have it. I know what's going to happen. And now we're at this point. There's no turning back. I don't want it. And that's so hard. And that's so human, like you said, to be in that point.
And you talk about the anxiety of it. I mean, so here's the other part of it. He knows God can do anything. He knows that he is part of God. He is God too. And probably could avoid it if he chose to, I guess. But he knows what God's will is, right? And we could talk about the whole notion of, surely there had to be another way that mankind could have been redeemed. I mean, God could have found other ways. Why this? And the only thing that I can come up with, and it is one of those questions that, when my great day of arising comes, I do want to ask, why send your son? Why that? And there's all kinds of atonement theories that you can do. Christus Victor, all these different ones that you could say that. But honestly, for me, I think the reason is because the parents that I have known that have gone through the loss of a child, there is nothing. There's nothing on this earth that I've heard of that is difficult.
Yeah.
And so I'm guessing that there's something to do with that, right? And so I'm guessing that Jesus kind of gets it, but still at the same time, we all know that we don't get out of this earth alive, right? I mean, that's a thing. It's a thing. None of us particularly want to do it. Some of us are probably closer than others. As you get older and that kind of stuff, you think about it a little bit differently and maybe a little bit more. But it's inevitable.
Yeah.
But there's also this part of Jesus that I think he knows what it is to love. He knows what it is to be loved. And all of us, even in the hardest parts of our life, I think we would say life is life. And there's an element of it, even in its hardest moments, that we would still say life is good. It's like the T-shirts, right? Or,
Yeah.
Life is good kind of thing, right? And I think that's what Jesus, he was human. He'd experienced that. He knew that. And he also probably knew how difficult his death was going to be. I don't think God spared anything from him or withheld anything.
And it's the ability, he has the ability to spare him. And that's the key for me, is that if you believe,
I don't think he would.
That's my point. You have, it's him being tempted in the desert by the devil. And the devil says, you can take this all away. But that's not what Jesus came to do. And the reason I chose the Luke version of this, because I love all the different versions of this, but the reason I chose the Luke version of this is because Luke is the only one, an angel comes down. And that further emphasizes the point for me. This angel comes down and does not give him comfort, but gives him strength.
Yeah,
and I think
exactly.
There's a key difference there. He's not saying, I'm going to make this all okay for you. I'm going to make you not suffer. He's saying, I'm going to make it so you can go through this, because that's the real sacrifice of the story.
And I will say that I think that to me is where the greatest comfort comes from, right, in all of this. Because even in the anguish of this, even in the anxiety, and I don't care who you are, in a sense, think of this as like Jesus was like on death row. I mean, he kind of knew what was coming, right? And I've often thought about that, the people who are on death row, what it must be like, especially like the night before, or the day before, what that feeling of dread, maybe, is that the word, and that kind of thing. Jesus had to be feeling all of that in that moment, to the point where it even says, that he was in anguish enough that he sweat great drops of blood, kind of thing. It was rough. But to your point, even in the midst of that, God provides solace in the form of an angel who comes not to take it away from him, not to take it, the human aspect of life, and death away from him, but to bolster him up and say, hey, think about the big picture.
Yeah.
This is just for a moment. Bigger picture, greater things lie ahead.
And I think what the angel coming down is obviously a miracle, but I think the most holy moment of this is 44. My favorite 3 lines, or my favorite 5 words in it. In his anguish, he prayed. That's beautiful. And like that image of death row, you're standing there, you know what's about to occur. And I took a class about critical issues in the justice system. We talked a lot about the death penalty. And you read stories of people of, did they find comfort at the end? Did they have that moment? And for Jesus, it happens long before everything else happens. Because I think this is his turning point. In his anguish, he prayed more earnestly. And that's why the rest of it, he can be strong. And he can stand up to Herod. Because in this moment, he gets that moment.
It's funny. He told them when they went to the garden, and you look at all the Gospels, pretty much says, whether they come with him physically or whether he tells them to sit and stay and pray, he tells them to stay awake, right? And he goes back in all 4 Gospels. He goes back 3 times, and all 3 times they're asleep. So here, to me, what that says is even our most trusted friends, our family, our loved ones, they can't be for us the support and the help that we get from God in our deepest and darkest moments. And that's kind of, to me, where I look at this and I go, yeah, that angel, that was a cool touch, because that really exemplifies that we are not alone.
And to your point, like, I actually just got off right before this. I was on a Zoom call with Derek. And we were just doing like spiritual mentoring. And one of the things we talked about is like, that's not to the fault of those people. That's not like, it's just something that they can't provide like God can. And why I like the Luke version of this, because the Mark one is the one where you fully get the back and forth of him like pleading with the disciples, stay awake, stay
Come
awake,
on,
stay
stay
awake.
with me.
But this one, it simply says them sleeping because of grief. And I've never thought about it that way, of like to the point we're making, like they just can't provide it. They cannot stay awake. They are asleep because of everything that's going on, not just because they're like lazy and foolish. Like they can't give that like Jesus needs.
Well, and it comes back to our humanness, right? And I know wine was like water, but we're talking about spirits and stuff. They've had a full meal. They've had a couple of glasses of wine. I get it. I mean, that's the humanness of who we are, right? I mean, and yet he loved them still, right?
Yeah. Even that majesty continues into the next part, because this in Luke it goes straight into the betrayal, and that's the most magical part of the betrayal, is that he still loves, and he puts back the ear, and he forgives Judas, and like that I can't imagine. That is the holiness of Jesus. That is something I think we all aspire to, because he does it so well and he embodies it.
And then it goes on, even in all of this anguish, right, that he's, and I'm sure conflicted feelings and all of this stuff, he prays. I'm guessing he got the strength that he needed or whatever, because then game on, right? Mm-hmm. Because then they come in, Judas comes up, right? Jesus knows what's coming. He knows why Judas is there. Who do you seek? Who are you looking for? Jesus of Nazareth. And they fall back. Maybe it's John. I can't remember which one it is, but they fall back. He tells them, who is it? Who you look for? Jesus of Nazareth. I am he. And they fall back. And I'm like, okay, that's a little dramatic, but I kind of like it.
But it's awesome.
It's Cecil B. DeMille kind of thing, But that's yeah, okay. And again, he says, who do you look for? And I said, it's Jesus of Nazareth. And he's looking at Judas. I just know it. And it's like, Judas, just do what you got to do. Let's get this done. Let's game on.
What I think about is I know a lot of people probably think of a sports analogy, but you know me, you've seen my performances. I always think about being in a show, because no matter, I did theater from 4th grade until my senior year, and every performance I did, you get to right before curtains raise, and you don't think you're going to be able to do it. And for me, it was always that drop in my heart and that pit in my stomach of like, okay, this is that moment. Let me say a little prayer. That's the fear. But then, like you said, it's game on. Once that curtain's open, Jesus has to take his moment of like, this is going to be really hard. God, I don't know if I can do this. And God gives him an angel, and he's like, okay, buckle up, because from here on out, I'm doing it. And that's why I love.
And I got you. Don't forget that part, because that's the thing that we claim on, right? Is God saying, I got you. Son, I got you. It's okay. I got you.
And that's what I love about the rest of the story, is because we can keep going with this. One of the things I've brought up on other episodes before is how he stands against Herod and how he stands against everybody who's trying him, because that's such an act of resistance. That's such a, like, I'm here, I'm doing it. I know my purpose. I don't have to conform to you. I don't have to prove anything.
Even, I think one of the tenderest moments, and again, I come back to, I'm not a parent, but how hard that must have been for his mother Mary to watch him on the cross. I just, blah. Mm-hmm. But even in that moment, he looks over to John, and he's, he basically says, Mother, behold thy son, but then tells John, basically, you take care of her. So he's thinking not of himself, hanging on the cross, but he's making sure that his mom's cared for too.
And how I see that moment, I see that as the inverse Gethsemane in a way, of he sees that anguish, and so he's going to send that angel. He's going to give that moment, because he's been there. He just did it. He had that moment. And so giving that, and again, not comfort, because there's a difference. Comfort versus strength. Being there for someone.
Exactly.
It doesn't make it easier. It's still, she has her heart on that cross. It still hurts. But he's going to send someone.
That's amazing. It's just, and it's like all these little linkages together when you start knitting it. It's to me, that's the beautiful part of the gospel, is that it's if you look deep enough, you find all of these threads that tie everything together, that God's promise of love and of grace, it never fails. It just never fails.
And the key, I think, for young people to learn and people my age to learn is that God's promise is not that it's going to be easy. If somebody tells us anything, it's going to be really hard sometimes.
It can be. There will be hard moments, for sure.
But the promise is that God will be with you in that, and God will give you strength, because like that you're going to have that moment at the Mount of Olives of like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Everything feels like it's turning around and it's not going to work. It's not a promise of ease. It's a promise of support and of strength, not comfort.
And even in the moments where we might feel like we are the most alone or isolated in the world, even though we may be in the midst of a lot of people around us or whatever, but we're experiencing something and it's so intense or whatever that we feel that we're totally alone. We're not. That's that promise. We're not. Right? That's the cool part of all this. And
I can think of, you can share however much you want, but I think of like the times in my life that have felt like that. And that image of an angel still being there with you. It's that classic poem about the walking alongside the footsteps on the beach. And in the hardest moments when I couldn't walk, why were there only one set of footprints? It's because I was being held. And I think about like some of my moments. I do think about still 2016 being a sixth grader, having to understand loss for the first time and having to understand loss like at a younger age. And that there are times from that period where I remember feeling comforted by just a presence, by just an idea, because that I think it's a cliche, but that is where God shows up. When you look around, that is where you feel it sometimes.
Absolutely. You know, that's one thing too. I'm old enough, right? That I mean, I've lost my parents, I've lost dear friends, that kind of stuff, and experienced some kind of like hard kind of things. And I won't lie, Sam. In those moments, it's the pits.
Yeah.
But it's the fact that surrounded by people who either love me or I love. I sometimes think of them as my angels that God has put there, right? Not perfect, but they're there, and I'm blessed by them. And so I think the other part of this is we need to ask ourselves, who can we be the angels for, right? Who can we be that angel in the Garden of Gethsemane for?
And acknowledging that sometimes, like what we talked about with disciples, our human nature sometimes doesn't go that far. But how can we show up for people in spite of that? How can we keep being there for someone?
You can get into even thoughts around the whole issues of mercy and justice and stuff. Sometimes I think it can be just as simple as lifting your voice against an injustice that's taken place. It may not seem like a lot, but it can matter. It really can.
Yeah, being even the idea the idea of saying it, the idea of embodying it, of standing up for it, like you said, because I think it seems really daunting to stand up against injustice, and that seems like the highest thing you can do, but sometimes that doesn't mean taking on an army. It just means saying something for someone and calling out something that probably shouldn't have been said. And I think that's, again, another situation, kind of like feeling anxiety, that I think we've all felt that discomfort, felt that, something, that wasn't how that should go. And sometimes standing up for someone is being someone's angel.
How do we get to be those angels?
So you said you knew the song ahead of time. I love that. That song, if anybody who's listening hasn't listened to it, go ahead and listen to it. I say listen to the John Legend version. I absolutely love it.
Oh, yeah. There's no doubt the John Legend version's the best. There's actually one, I wrote it down because it just spoke to me. Wait a minute. At first, I was inspired. Now I'm sad and tired. And I think that kind of sums it up, right?
Or even my favorite line is when he talks about tried for 3 years feels like 30. And later on in the song, it gets even harder, where tried for 3 years feels like 90. Like that, when we talk about, if we're going into the conversation about justice and facing injustice, that's sometimes what it feels like, right? That you've been working up against this for so long, and it's not moving. And I think it's a human emotion, and I think Jesus' example shows us maybe the non-human reaction of how to keep going and how to push through it. Because I think the most, I said this earlier, but I'm actually changing my mind. I think the most actual godly part of this is the semicolon, which sounds like a weird answer, but it's how quickly he goes from take this cup away from me to thy will be done, not mine. Because that does not take that long in my experience. That takes a lot longer, to be honest.
In real life, yeah, right?
In real life, that's not just a semicolon. That's not one thought.
Yes.
That's a much longer period.
You are right about that.
I feel like I'm currently I've been in similar spots of how much longer does it actually take to give it up to God instead of immediately doing it. That's why I love the song.
Well, that's part of our humanness too, right? I mean, we want control. That's just all there is to it. We want control, and in the reality of things, we really don't have that much.
Mm-hmm. There's really not anything in this world we can fully control, or even have the control of knowing what's going to happen. I think that's why death is such the universal human fear, is because it's the thing in this world that we can control the least, and we know the least about. And we know it. We know that it exists, but it's so amorphous, yet so real at the same time. I've always felt that way. I felt that way since I was a little too young.
But it's true. That's kind of why it's kind of cool to be on the journey with people around you, right? Because you just don't know. Yeah. And things are, I can plan to do something, or I can plan something out, but I never know really what's going to end up happening, right? Mm-hmm. The best I hope for is to be on the journey with some people around me who, they're gonna try to help me in the times that aren't good ones, and they'll be with me to rejoice in the times that are good. So yeah, it's all right. It's all right. And then, like I say, every now and then there'll be an angel that'll show up, just like the angel in the Garden of Gethsemane. Mm-hmm. It's kind of cool too.
Do you think you have a recent angel moment that comes to mind?
Well, yeah, and it's funny, but it's not. It's kind of a sad thing that happened. And you might have heard about this, but we lost a really amazing clergy woman in the Florida Annual Conference, Reverend Terry Hill. Mm-hmm. And I got to meet her through some work that I actually got to do with your mom down at First United Methodist Church of Key West. Mm-hmm. Way before it was really cool to be an inclusive church. They were doing some really inclusive things there. It was kind of nice. Mm-hmm. And I got to know Terry and her husband, John, and had the opportunity to go to her celebration of life. Mm-hmm. And it was amazing. But more importantly, and I think it's a testament to who she was, there were people there who I would say were great titans of our church. Yeah. And have been for years, and especially of our conference. And I had someone that walked up to me because it struck me. It really it kind of struck me. And they ended up being that angel in that moment, because I was like, man, why did this have to happen? Yeah. Right? And they would never know it. They sat right down beside me, sat through the service with me, that kind of thing, and they would have no idea, but they were that angel in that moment for me. Mm-hmm. So yeah,
that's beautiful. Yeah, and you said they don't know if they were, that kind of thing. They'll never know. Not to turn this around, I didn't think I was going to go into this on this podcast, but do you know that that's our do you know that you've done that for me? Do you know that part of our relationship? Alice?
Me?
Oh yes, Alice. Like
Oh God, no.
even recently, we almost filmed this in Orlando, because I was down for a little bit, because there are times in a school semester where you just need to go, and you just need to go home, and you need to feel it. And like Jesus, I need to be a stone's throw away for a little bit, and I need to be back in my garden. And like me and you had a great conversation about that, because I don't think you realize how much impact you have when it comes to being an angel in people's lives.
No, I don't know anything about that. I don't, but that's, aren't we all called to be that though, right? I mean, that's the thing. And you know, I mean, Sam, that's lovely, but you've been the angel for me too. So it's, you know, it's kind of a cool thing all the way around. But that's what I think we're supposed to be. And I just can't help but think that the world would be so different if we just started looking at how do we come alongside the people that we love, and even those that maybe we don't, and just how can we be that angel, like the angel in the Garden of Gethsemane, that just says, it's okay, it's going to be all right. And even if we can't change anything.
And here's the most powerful part of the angel metaphor for me. I wrote this down as one of the possible talking points. To our knowledge, the angel doesn't say anything.
I
don't
angel
even know
shows up. Other than they were there, just their presence, right?
Exactly. And like that, we talk, I think sometimes, I said this earlier, sometimes when we say like standing up to injustice and standing with the oppressed feels so big, yet this angel provided strength by being there and by existing in that space with Jesus.
Sam, that kind of leads down another rabbit hole. But how many times are we like the disciples, and we're either sleeping through it or we're not paying attention, and there's this like miracle thing that's happening, and I mean, like this angel shows up. God provides this angel. How often does that happen? Somebody said to me one time, how often do we go by burning bushes in our own life? You know, Moses in the burning bush, right? How many times do we walk right by a moment that's God inspired, and we just don't take the time to see it, kind of thing? Yeah.
I feel like it's human nature to miss it and to not see it.
And I think they're all the time. I mean, I think if we'll just take the time to look, I think there's probably way more of them than we ever give credit for.
Mm-hmm. And you think about, like, that goes into the conversation of, like, all the opportunities and, like, the small things where either something could have changed everything in your life, or maybe you could have been there and you could have been that person for something. Like, I think part of being on a spiritual process, and something I'm working on right now with Derek, actually, I'm just going to call him out again, is that slowing down part and that noticing and being very intentional about what you're hearing and what you're listening to.
And Sam, don't get me wrong. I don't think God keeps score about what we see and what we don't see. I don't think it's that. I just think that when we do see them, or when we allow ourselves to experience them, then that's more of that abundant life that we can have. Mm-hmm. When you hear the term abundant life, I don't think it's just about being in heaven. I think it's about how we live on earth and how we do. So, yeah.
My recent, this is an angel, I shared my angel moment. My recent burning bush moment was thinking about, it's Lent. It's always the time to either take up something or to take something away. And I really was sitting there. I'm trying to like build my own spiritual discipleship and like be more like intentional about my practice. And I was sitting there and I was like, I gotta be honest, I really don't want to read my devotional right now. I really would rather go to sleep. I felt like a disciple, to be honest. I didn't think about that metaphor, but like I was like, I want to do anything besides this right now. And opened up I have the Methodist prayer book, and it was talking about the definition of devotion is doing something even when you don't want to, and how much more important it is to build that when you don't want to. And I was like, okay, God, okay, I get it. It was right there in front of me. That was my call of like, okay, I see what you're trying to say. I felt like a disciple in the garden waking up and be like, okay, I'm sorry, realize what I'm missing right now.
Yeah, I do wonder if when they woke up, they're like, what did we miss? What's going on? What happened?
I like, specifically, that's a funny idea.
It's like people that I know that go to movies and they fall asleep in the movie theater, right?
Yeah.
They wake up like, what? How did that happen? What?
And in this version, it's a very scary turn in the movie to wake up and have all these guards around you. and have people drawing swords. You're like, oh crap, I was taking a power nap. Do you think, in the spirit of this podcast, do you think that the disciples sobered up a little bit when people started drawing swords on them?
I think it got real for them at that moment, right? I mean, I think that was beyond sobering. Mm-hmm. It was like, oh, okay, this is what he's been talking about. I think it's funny. I bet there was a gambit. I bet some of the disciples were like, what the heck? And then I think there were some that were like, okay, this is what he's been trying to say to us. And then there were some that just probably wanted to wet their pants.
Yeah. Or the opposite, wanted to just start fighting. Just wanted to start.
Well, yeah. Two of the Gospels, they talk about whacking off the guy's ear, right? And here's the funny part about that. One of the Gospels, the guy gets healed, and the other one doesn't say anything about whether he gets healed or not. I'm like, wait, you can't. How do you leave that part of the story out?
That was not important enough of a detail for him getting healed, apparently. And I like that notion, as silly as it is, of like, there's a timeline of everybody figuring it out. Because I do think there was probably some disciples who got to the cross and were like, I get it. I understand. I don't remember which gospel it is, but there's a text after the resurrection where all was revealed to the disciples.
All was revealed. That's right.
Mm-hmm. And that as silly as we're making it right now, of like, oh, I didn't get it. Like, that is something beautiful and human of like, I have no idea what's going on. Life's just happening and I'm going to figure it out.
And then isn't it interesting that after all that happens, the Saturday after Jesus' death, they're in anger. Mm-hmm. Right? So they're kind of having their own Garden of Gethsemane moment, right? Yeah. To a degree. And they're frightened because they've lost their leader, they've lost the person that they love that was leading them. And now everybody hates them and is looking after them, looking for them, and they're in danger now, kind of thing. Yeah,
I've never thought about that.
Yeah, I think they probably had their own kind of Garden of Gethsemane kind of moment.
Especially Jesus has the benefit of being mostly holy and knowing what's coming. These disciples have no idea what's coming around the corner. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining on this episode. This was so much fun.
Sam, it's always good to see you. Thank you for asking me to do it. And I guess the only other thing that I would just want to make sure that we add is the fact that notion that we're never alone, never completely alone. And may feel it even in our darkest moments. Mm-hmm. There will be an angel. There will be a moment where at least in my experience, there'll be a moment where you'll know that God is telling you you're not alone. And you can get through it.
And to those of you who are listening right now, we've talked about it a lot on the other podcast on Annex about right now there's a lot of people who don't feel that. And it's a time where it is easier. We just had this conversation the other day. It is easier to feel like everything is bad. And it is easier to stay in the garden and feel alone. But it is so, like you said, abundant life. It is so much more fulfilling to realize and to look around and say, no, this is really scary, but I'm not alone in this. There's things working around me that I can't see. Something's going to give me strength. So I hope that people listening understand that and can feel that a little bit. Maybe that this podcast brings a little comfort.
But I want to go back to Terry Hill's
please, yeah,
the story that they said, because there was a moment that she shared with her covenant group. She knew that she was dying and she was in hospice and she was in a assisted care living facility. And there was a moment because of her illness where there came a point that she lost the use of her legs. She became paralyzed. And so one of the aides, caregivers, came in and said, okay, I'm going to move you from the bed to the chair. And Terry must have had some trepidation about, like, can you really lift me? It was another lady. The woman says, I got you. I can do this. She said, I'm going to put my hand around your back. I'm going to put my other hand underneath your knees. I'm just going to lift you from the bed to the chair. And the woman said to her, do you trust me? And Terry said, well, I mean, you don't have a lot of choice.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I trust you. There was maybe a week later or a few nights later, Terry was really coming to terms with what she was facing, and she knew that it wasn't going to be that much longer. And she said she had this God moment where she literally heard in her head God saying to her, you know what just happened with the aid and moving to the chair? Terry, do you trust me? Do you trust me? And I'm like, okay, that's a really cool God angel moment right there, just in itself. Sometimes I think we need to listen to the voices that we get in our heads, or the moments as they happen. We need to embrace them and think, could there be something more? Because a lot of times there is. Anyway, all right.
That was beautiful. Oh my gosh. Oh wow.
All right.
Okay, pray us out. Now I'm feeling it.
Gracious God, for this day and the way that you are among us, even when we don't know it or recognize it or appreciate it, we just want to say thank you. Lord, the story of Garden of Gethsemane and what's happening there, and anguish that Jesus felt, it's all part of being human. Help us never to forget the gift of the fact that you gave us the opportunity to know what it is to be fully human and fully alive. Help us to live in a way that we can come alongside others who are having those Garden of Gethsemane moments, so that we can be that angel for someone else. Most of all, Lord, we just ask right now that you would be with us. Help us to see with your eyes, to hear with your ears, to give of ourselves through our hands and feet in a way that the world would see you and your love through us. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I want to thank you so much for joining me. This was really, really nice. I always love being with you. I want to thank everybody for listening to this. And a reminder, whether you are in your own garden right now and you're feeling alone, or whether you are sleeping in your grief by other people who are beside you in their own garden, or whether you are an angel to someone else, or whether you're all at once, this is a story that I think gives us a purpose with this and gives us that hope. So I hope you enjoyed being here with us. Alice, I love you so much. I'm so glad.
Love you too, Sam. Hope to see you soon.
I'm going to steal a little bit from Annex and say, with all God's people said, bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Holy Spirits, a Studio Wesley Annex series. This podcast is produced by the team at Wesley's Revival, and in accordance with UMC Social Principles, all individuals consuming alcohol during our recordings are of U.S. legal age and drinking responsibly.